Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Walker Independence Season 1, Episode 12. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, I love this episode, like us kind of getting an understanding of all these characters, all these people whose lives are so intertwined. We get a little snippet, a slice of life into how they got here to Independence. First and foremost, we meet Gus when he was a soldier, and obviously him and Callian's first encounter, and how it's like, right, he's writing a letter to his wife, you know, on the battlefield, and it's like, yeah, this might be the end. He's even asking Callian, like, hey, at least wait for me to finish this letter. But it is a situation of, he couldn't go through the orders. Like, it was probably a situation of killing people. I don't know if it was specifically Callian and his people, if it was that kind of time type of situation, like, The English. If you haven't seen that on Prime Video, I highly recommend it. Especially if you're into Walker Independence, I think you'll really like. It's a 6-episode show. It's a one and done. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But I wonder if it's kind of something along those lines of like, hey, let's wipe out, indigenous tribes type of thing, or was it just he just said there was an order he couldn't go through, and maybe Gus had talked about that previously and I'm just not remembering off the top of my head. But seeing that side of him, Callian's like, you're from Louisiana, I'd love to go there one day. He's like, why? He's like, I heard the food is good. So and I love that being the overarching theme of this, of so many people's lives affected and so many roots that are connected that maybe they never pieced together. Like, the fact of the matter is, Callian sparing his life that day, that ended up creating the bond that they had, the friendship and the partnership they eventually have. Obviously he found out about, sadly, Gus's wife died in a carriage accident. Apparently, the carriage ended up crashing, and he kind of felt like he had nothing to live for, so he went and turned himself into Otis, because I was like, right, of course Otis would be sheriff at this time, because Gus was his deputy previously. It was like, okay, so that makes sense. And so Otis is the one that kind of gave him a new lease on life, because he had kind of given up, because it's like, hey, the fact of the matter is, I'm a deserter. I'm going, whatever punishment befalls me, whether it's death or jail, whatever the case may be, at least I know there's someone that's going to be waiting for me up in heaven. But for Otis, he wasn't willing to. He's like, the fact of the matter is, I'm actually going to make you my deputy. Because he's like, the fact of the matter is, being a deputy is all about making hard choices. You as a soldier, you made a hard choice about not following an order you didn't believe in. Now here you are making a hard choice, knowing what the consequences will be for you. You're willing to face those consequences, because it just shows what kind of honorable person Gus is. Because for him, it's like, I don't want to live the rest of my life as a fugitive. I want to, die with honor and because the woman I love is watching me, and I want to show her I'm someone she could be proud of. And he wanted to do, the honorable thing. And for Otis, it's like being a sheriff deputy means hard choices. So. And we find out Otis shot and killed his previous deputy as well, but it's like, it killed his previous deputy. It's like, because I couldn't trust him. And that line that holds so steadfast in it's a foundation of, it plays into who Gus is, but that line that's important: no one's above the law. That's why Otis took out his deputy. It's like, yeah, he betrayed me and he betrayed this town. Maybe Otis had talked about it previously when he popped up in the show, what his deputy actually did. But yeah. Seeing Gus put on that badge, and then we get Kate's backstory, her first day here in Independence, trying to find a cover job. Once again, this was supposed to be her redemption after the previous job went super sideways, Kate still hasn't really talked about the ins and outs of that. I think even with, I don't even think home dude, her superior, she was kind of sleeping with. I don't even think they really went into the ins and outs of that. They talked about it a little bit, but we got a little bit of a flashback with it. And it's interesting, the parallels of, obviously she couldn't get any jobs, but who does she run into who kind of is the first person to kind of show her some kindness in the town? And that was Kai. And he kind of gave her some advice. But I love he was like, yeah, here I am kind of trying to give you sage advice. Like it's like life is that simple that you could just give some simple response or answer, and that kind of makes everything copacetic. I thought that was kind of neat, but kind of seeing that immediate bond between them, I thought was kind of nice to know. It's sad to know where we are currently, where they are not seeing eye to eye. Obviously, they've had a rough patch these past 2 or 3 episodes, and now the last episode was also pretty bad because of Kate and them trying to do the right thing, screwing over this railroad deal. There will be repercussions. So there's that. But her interview at Hagen's was because she was kind of thinking about the previous job and stuff like that, and the way she talked to Hagen, he was like, "Wait, why does it feel like you're interviewing me?" She's like, "I am." He's like, "Huh?" Like he likes her spunk, you know. So she ended up getting a job. That eventually ends up walking past. Then there's like Gus putting up these wanted posters for Hoyt, which we learn about his backstory, that the reason why he's the grifter that he is because of his mom. The fact of the matter is that's how they made their living. They go around, they grifted until it finally caught up with his mom. And, Hoyt was like, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm going to get you out of this." And I'm curious what happened. And once again, it's one of those things now I want to go back. I'm like, did they ever... I mean, we heard a little bit about Hoyt's family, obviously, like his connection to the Reyes's. That's why his mom, when she was getting arrested, taken by Rangers specifically. Interesting how that works out. But it's like, taken by... it's like, hey, I want to take him over to the Reyes's. I wonder, was he completely on his own, or did he have to find his way to the Reyes's, or did he just stay on his own? I'm curious how that... I mean, we know... Well, I think they talked about, like, Francis took him in. I mean, the entire family took him in when he was fairly young. I think they talked about it previously, but him saying, like, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm going to find you and I'm going to bust you out." And part of me wonders, did he never actually have an opportunity? Like, did his mom get, like, hung, or, like, did she die? The fact is that we just don't know. And also, like, him sitting there with the lollipop in his mouth. At first I was like, dude, are cigarettes around it? Cigarettes are around this time. Are they? Probably not. But I thought at first I was like, is that what that is? But it's like, no, it was a lollipop. I was like, oh, how that ties back in him being kind of like this lollipop kid. Because it's like, oh, he faked his stomach ache at the bank, being like, oh, my stomach, all those delicious lollipops I ate. And that's also that sad thing about that criminal life. Like, eventually it will always catch up to you in some shape or form. Like, no matter how good you think you are, there's always going to be someone that ends up, you might slip up somewhere. And, his mom did. And we had an interesting encounter with him crossing paths with, he didn't know was I don't know if it was another ranger or whether he was just maybe a marshal or whatever. He was a man with a badge. It was a Jared Padalecki, which I was like, that's so weird. Because I saw like a thumbnail, like, for the promo for this episode, and it was the thumbnail picture was Jared Padalecki, and I was like, is it gonna be like a flashback or something? Like, is it gonna start with, like, they're gonna pull a little bit of a supernatural? And it's like, because I love Hoyt being like, oh, you have a familiar face, and he's like, yeah, I just have one of those. I was like, shut up. I was like, that's funny. As here we are, like, still reenacting this whole thing. Here you are, the law, this guy's the lawman and Hoyt's the criminal, and the situation plays out very differently. Obviously, Hoyt died, and obviously Cordell lived. Now we have the inverse, where it's like, well, that cop was still alive, but I'm sure Hoyt took him somewhere and buried him, so he is most likely super dead. So, because it was like a whole train thing. That's like, almost like are we going to do this or not? Like, we're going to rob this train, like, trying to figure it out. They were trying to suss each other out, and he probably thought, like, oh, you're another criminal. And I love that line from him saying, like, right, I already lost my once-in-a-life partner, his mom. It's like, yeah, like, she's the only partner he's ever going to fully trust. He's like, since then, it's like, yeah, I'll work with other people, but I only truly, truly trust one person in this world. So I also love... obviously he runs into Lucia, and even her saying, it's back to that line of the only time she knows, like, he's generally in the area is when wanted posters are up. Once again, that's like our only way of knowing, like, hey, maybe you're out there, you're alive, because he won't stick around. I mean, and now knowing about his mom, it adds to why Independence is such a complicated place for him. And so he ended up overhearing Kai and Kate talking about the pastor, which is where we got introduced. So it's like, okay, so time kind of caught up to the very beginning of the series in that regard for Hoyt, because that's the scam he was on when we first got introduced to him. Or it was in the aftermath of that scam going sideways. We didn't get the beginning of it. He obviously rectified that over the course of the show, coming back to that. But like the ending... we saw the ending of all of that at the beginning with Hoyt, so I thought that was kind of neat. I also love that he saw Kate with a gun strapped to her leg. He was like, what the hell? Like, obviously he didn't think much of it. Like, why would he kind of piece that together? But it just kind of like, whatever. He probably like brushed it off while he went to go do the pastor thing. I mean, he was, around a distillery, so he's probably drinking himself silly too. So he probably ended up forgetting about that. I believe next was Shane and Tom. And we find out that, also, I did not realize it was that short a time that Liam and Abby were only together. I mean, to be fair, we know it's like, right, he was engaged to her sister previously, but it's like still, it's like a short span of time. It was like, what? Like, David's like, oh, like, wait, why didn't Liam let us know a few weeks back that he changed his mind because he's bailing out of, like, what their plan was? And Teresa was like, yeah, he went and found himself a good woman. I was like, oh. I was like, really? It only took a couple weeks for them to... Yeah, and her being the good, kind-hearted person she was, changed him for the better, and he didn't want to do this anymore. What he was mixed up with the Davidsons. And it was actually Teresa's idea to take Liam out, even suggesting like, oh, let's take out his wife too. And then like Tom was like, oh, well, go ahead and take out the whole family. Shane's like, yeah, we might as well. It's like, shows you how much of a psychopath Shane is, that he's really going like, oh yeah, it's like genocide the entire family just to make a point, and just to also make sure, because we don't know what he might have told anyone. We don't want any loose ends. But Teresa's the one that's like, no, we need to do this. Once again, it's like Shane's got your father's loyalty. So it feels like Teresa's kind of making her own moves, and she's bringing Tom along because Tom's our favorite nephew, because I guess it's like, right, Tom has always been the black sheep of the family, even though Shane would say, I'm the black sheep of the family. But I think in Shane's case, he has their father's loyalty and ear, whereas Tom doesn't. He has to do everything to prove himself to his father, to his family. And I think that's why Teresa probably is like, right, makes you the perfect person to work with me. So you kind of have to do this because you're going to get it done, because you will get it done, because it's for family. And he's like, okay. So, and then we see, and we get the interesting reveal that Tom has always known who Abby was. It's like, that's fascinating. And now we also know why. And I was like, so why have you been playing coy about it? It's because he likes her. Like, he heard her, talking, and he found himself like deeply in love with her. You're like, dude, because Tom in his heart is a bit of a romantic. And I guess like it stems from the complicated nature of his family, where it's like he kind of had to find love and validation kind of outside of it, because maybe even with his family, even with Teresa, it feels like everything's kind of, what can we do for each other? Like, it's about more so what we can do for each other rather than that love. It's just like that. It definitely feels like the Davidsons are always just, at least, these Davidsons in particular are always like looking out for self-interest. It's kind of like, what can we do for you type of thing. It's just that I mean, even the whole like back and forth between him and his brother, the complicated relationship he has with his own father, like it kind of showcases that family's not all that it's cracked up to be. Family's complicated. And I think that's also probably hearing a little bit from Abby about like, oh yeah, like I just didn't want, I want to keep this piano because it was my grandfather's, and I want to hold some piece of my family, the good side of my family, not the bad. And I think Tom can kind of connect with that. So he was watching them for like a week. And once again, these circumstances, and once again, these situations and connections that have such a profound effect on people. For Tom, like, he was changed by this event. I mean, even before, everything that happened to Abby led to her becoming the person she is now, but also it's like, right, she had to run away from like so much, as we know her complicated family situation, as we learned from her sister, what she's kind of running from, especially her dad, because she was talking to a woman, Eliza, who was kind of like, all right, like, here, all we had to do is hear you complain, like, oh, you think you're better than us, playing your piano all the time. It's like, no, I don't think I'm better. And she's like, yes, you might be rich and stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is, none of that kind of matters out here in the wasteland type of situation. And Eliza was about to have her baby, and it's like, oh, here are these, I don't have enough to pay you back for these dresses you're ripping up to help deliver my baby. It's like, that's not the point. The fact is that, and they connected over the family situation, because it's like, because she was like, oh, do you have any kids? And it's like, no. She's like, I kind of had a family thing I was running from, until she's like, I met Liam. He restored my faith in people and family. And it's like, right, your family, it doesn't always have to be blood. It can be the family you found, which is what ended up happening here in Independence. They all kind of found a pseudo non-blood related family. And the sad tragedy is Eliza ended up dying. And her husband was kind of like, oh, do you want to take, but had Abby had a baby before and lost it? Like that conversation made it almost imply like I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into that. Maybe they said something about that, but I don't think so. But it made me feel like Abby might have had a baby at one point in time, but lost it. I don't remember if that came up or not. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Like I said, maybe I'm just being stupid. Maybe I'm thinking about something else. Either way, Abby was like, no, like all this baby needs, it's a loving father. The fact of the matter is life can be quite challenging, but those moments when life kind of throws you those hard balls, that's when you have to like dig deep and kind of hold on tight and like hold on to your child. And he was like, yeah, we're going to be in Austin. And if you ever want to, stop by and say hello, like the baby's name, that's where she got the name Abigail from. No, I forgot. I'm stupid. Abigail, I forgot. We found out Abigail is her middle name. So it's like, right. It's like the baby having the name Abigail, I'm sure for her almost felt fortuitous in some regards. So, but Shane showed up while Tom's there keeping an eye on her. I think he ended up getting her one of her books. I'm blanking on what book it was, but he was reading it. And I guess that's what he was reading while he was watching over her. And ultimately, when it was all said and done, Shane was kind of like, right, we have to do this. Because he talks about the fact is that Tom's a bit of a romantic. It's like your love life kind of gets you in complicated situation. What was it like? Was it Rosalie or whatever was the name? Or was it Rosalind? It was someone that his family kicked to the curb. And apparently her family disappeared. But like Shane was like, no, she was just going to use you for our family's money and influence. That's all it was. So dad did you a favor doing what was right for you. It's like at the end of the day, we got to pick family. And so Tom was just like, all right, because he's trying to be like, hey, I got the bigger picture here. They ultimately ended up doing what he was kind of, they wanted to make it seem like some indigenous tribe or whatever ended up attacking them. That was going to be like the setup. But Shane wasn't going to get too caught up in that because it's like, hey, let's leave the wife alone. But it's like, oh, here you are in love. I doubt Shane brought that up to the family. Well, why would he? Because they thought Abby was dead. So Shane went to go do it. So now part of me wonders why Abby was so confused. It's because both of them were there. They're both kind of wearing the same thing. So it's most likely Shane killed Liam and Tom shot Abby, and maybe him shooting her where he shot her wasn't like an accident. He probably shot her there on purpose. So he's always known she's been gunning for his throat. Like maybe he thought, or maybe he legitimately didn't think she knew who he was. Maybe that's what he thought, or maybe he knows that she knows that maybe that she has her suspicions, or maybe he's deluded enough to believe like, no, this can work out, even though you had a part to play in it. I don't think he shot Liam. I do believe he shot Abigail, but still, you were ordered to do it, and you're sadly going to do it, but you had your reservations. I mean, who knows what would have actually happened if Shane had never shown up. And so while that's happening, we come back to present day. And once again, that line of like Gus saying like kind of like these connections, this family, even cutting a Hoyt in his priest outfit that he got from Kai, which I love that he went to Kai for the priest outfit. I love that. And like how Kai like doesn't ask questions like, oh, you're in trouble. And he's like, yeah, I need to just lay low here a minute. But he's like, oh, here, I brought you these. Like, I know you stay here in this town. So kind of showing you these postcards from around the world. And Kai appreciates that. But because this whole monologue that Gus has been giving over the course of the episode, in the form of like, if you've been watching Winchesters, it's a monologue element. Is Dean giving monologues in every episode? So it kind of had that same vein to it. It was him writing to his wife Aubrey, because it was his way to kind of keep writing to her. And then it's like, right. And then we cut back to present day. It's like, all right, so how's this whole situation going to play out? And Shane did get shot, but the extra shots we heard were like Shane kind of firing 2 shots after he got shot. Gus got hit too. And Tom was like, all right, let's get out of here. And I was like, all right, well, maybe you can get him some help. But in that moment, Gus handcuffs him because he's like, right, no one's above the law. And he's got like the bullet pierced his neck. He's bleeding from his neck. And Shane knocked him out and cut Tom free. It's like, right, I can't let him I can't let him take you in, because at the end of the day, regardless of their bad blood, they are family. And in that moment, Tom was kind of chose his family because he wanted to help Gus. He was trying to help Gus. Like, he didn't want things to turn out that way. But Shane was like, yeah, I had no choice but to kill him. He was going to take you in. So, and they end up leaving Gus there. It's that sad aspect of, because especially for Gus, maybe in Gus's mind, he's always been living on borrowed time. And, he had this sinking feeling, and you hear it from that letter that he's been writing to Aubrey, and then ultimately it kind of came true. Like, the moment he met Tom, like, he felt it, but he probably just didn't know what it was. And it's just funny how funny and sad and tragic fate is. But when it's all said and done, it seems like this is the end of Gus's story. He did say, like, right, that this, like, for him, he felt like beforehand he ran away with the whole desertion thing. Because he knew if he went back home, hey, my family would suffer the ramifications. And even without him around, he blamed and beat himself up for not being there when his wife needed him. And so this time in his mind, it's like, I wasn't going to run. I was going to find that, the truth of it all, that, no matter kind of what it is, that's his job as a lawman. And once again, that circling back to that pivotal line that he said to Otis, where Otis was like, hey, no one's above the law, and he replied, I'll remember that. And he always kept true to that, even in this moment. So but I mean, like, who would know to come and get Gus under those circumstances? So it looks like he is, like, dead, and because he is bleeding from his neck, I don't think there's anyone who can save him now, which is sad, because Gus was such a good person. I mean, even him and Hoyt were, like, becoming friends, kind of very, very a la him and, like, Hoyt and Cordell's relationship in Walker. Very similar dynamic. And maybe that's even a more direct parallel in this regard, too, where it's like, I made that comparison before with Jarrett's character in this episode, but maybe the more direct comparison would be the opposite ends of Hoyt being alive and Gus being dead, after everything. So, like I said, a great episode. I'm really excited to see where everything takes us. The next episode is the season finale, so it's going to be fascinating to ultimately see how this entire season ends up wrapping up, how this story plays out. We'll ultimately have to wait to see what happens. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good